Hey guys, Matt Mollahan fishing here. Let's go fish. This time the ass is up in the land. Oh, there's one. Positive people, positive situations, positive things. What happens when you're positive? Right? Ooh. Oh, stripper. Hey, you're like a stripper, right? See that? Yeah. Did you just see that? Oh. Look at that thing. Woo. Hold my beer, watch this. Striper guide service coming soon. Holy shit! Look at that! Oh, you got the picture. Holy shit! Alright, guys, so I haven't done much video in the last little while. Been extremely busy and some kind of catching back up, so I want to do a Lake Chickamauga recap. Lake Chickamauga was tough. I didn't really catch many fish in practice. I had one decent day of practice and was actually catching a bunch of fish on docks, and that bite kind of went away. The water was dropping. It was real low on Lake Chickamauga, and that only lasted about a day. I was, getting bites and catching fish on a greenfish tackle all-purpose jig in this brown crawl color. Obviously, something I always have tied on any time of the year. And I put a Biz Baits cutter crawl on the back of it. But that was something I thought I'd be able to run with, but I never did get another bite on the dock. And what I ended up figuring out is kind of those fish, just with how cold it was during that week, they weren't really moving up. Everybody was kind of pushing in, like those fish were supposed to be moving up in some of those pre-spawn areas, but they were shallow, but they weren't moving up. They were kind of moving, they were on those flats that were kind of run out on the main river channel, and they would kind of run up shallow and then drop back off onto those first couple of ledges. And I kind of really figured that out the last day of practice, and really, surprisingly enough, the 2 days of 2 tournament days, I caught probably 30 fish a day, both days. Caught a ton of fish, just never could get a big bite. But that jig, I actually did catch some fish on those flats as well. Again, I always have a greenfish tackle jig title. I mean, the all-purpose brown crawl jig was perfect for those flats and those docks in practice. And it's just the only jig I trust. I always have one tied on, no matter what time of year. And I love to fish docks. So anytime I'm fishing docks, I'm skipping a jig. It's not too often I'm throwing a wacky rig or throwing all the other stuff everybody's throwing. They may get more bites than I do, but chances are I'm going to have a better sack on that jig. And greenfish, nobody makes a better jig than greenfish tackle for sure. Now, what I was catching the majority of my fish on those flats was a greenfish tackle spinnerbait. And this is the new ballistic blade. Used it a lot this year. It's the best spinnerbait on the market. I was actually using, and you can see how beat up this spinnerbait is. I've caught so many fish on this spinnerbait this year. It's got a gold blade and a red blade. Now, obviously, during those, the winter months, early spring when it's cold, red is a big color on any lake. And they just could not stand that red blade on that spinnerbait. It's white and chartreuse skirt, but it had the gold willow leaf and a red willow leaf blade, and man, they just absolutely choked this thing when they were shallow on those flats. And even on that first drop, as soon as it come off the flat, they would just light that thing up. I used a Big Baits grub on the back, and that's how I set up my spinnerbait. But they absolutely choked this thing. Just that ballistic blade puts off so much vibration in the water. Incredible spinnerbait. Other two things I was catching my fish on was a greenfish tackle G-flat, obviously red crawl. I mean, again, it's a staple this, early in the spring, wintertime. It's a flat-sided crankbait. It's a balsa crankbait. And again, I was catching a bunch of fish on this crankbait right here when they were shallow on those flats. Now, and then when they would move off a little bit deeper, on that first or second drop, I'd switch to this Rapala DT10 in the Caribbean shad color. Again, just, anytime I'm fishing, I can put on a DT, Rapala DT series crankbait. Man, it's just a lot of fun to catch. I mean, there's certain times I was catching, 4, 5, 6 fish in a row off one spot with this crankbait. And same with the G-flat when they were really shallow. So, those are the baits that I pretty much used to catch all my fish. It was fun those 2 tournament days. Again, never ended up getting a big bite either day. Unfortunately, finished 62nd in that tournament. But, it kept me up there in points and, gave me an opportunity to qualify for the championship at Santee with a top 40 finish. So that's pretty much how I did it on the spinnerbait. Again, I throw that on 15-pound high seas 100% fluorocarbon on a Lew's MB series reel 6/8-1 and an Arc Rods Lancer series 6/9 medium heavy spinnerbait rod. I guess they wanted to be in the video too. So that's the setup I use for that. Now on my crankbaits, again, just varies. Now on a deeper diving crankbait, on this DT10, I was actually using 10-pound high seas 100% fluorocarbon on this crankbait to get it, make sure I got it down there, to that 10, 11 foot depth. With that 10-pound test, I can get it down there, to that depth or even a little deeper sometimes, casting it out and kind of somewhat long line in the crankbait. So I wanted to make sure I got it down, so it was a little bit lighter line, but that high seas 100% fluorocarbon is the toughest line there is on the market. Best line, period. From their fluorocarbon to the braid to their copolymer to the monofilament, everything they have is just fantastic. So I was able to get that crankbait down where I needed it through this on a Lew's Tournament Series MB 5/3-1 crankbait reel and an Arc Crankbait Series rod 7/4 medium heavy. So that's the setup I like to use for my deeper diving crankbaits. Now on the G-flat, same thing. I was throwing on 10-pound 100% high seas fluorocarbon to get this thing down into that 4 and 5 foot depth. And same deal. Lew's Tournament MB crankbait reel, a 5/3-1, and then a Arc Rods Crankbait Series 7-foot medium heavy. So a little bit shorter rod on that because I wasn't making as long. I was kind of sitting on that first drop of those flats because it came up so quick and so shallow. But that was the setup I used for that. And then on the jig, for skipping docks, I like to throw an Arc Rod 7-foot medium heavy Invoker series. Okay, fast tip. It's got plenty of backbone, but it's got a soft tip on it as well to be able to skip that jig under those docks. So a perfect setup for that. And I was throwing that on a Lew's Team Light reel with high seas 100% fluorocarbon 15-pound test. So that was my setups for each one. And that's typically what I use anywhere I go. Now I will adjust my crankbait line, sometimes go up to 12-pound depending on the structure that I'm fishing. But the other critical aspect to finding those fish were my new Low Ranch HDS Live units. Finding those flats, the new C-Map. Mapping. They launched it at the Bassmaster Classic right before Chickamauga, the new mapping for Low Ranch. And Tennessee was the first one that came out, obviously the Classic being there, and we were there for the Costa. So I was able to get my hands on one of those new C-Map cards, and the detail of the C-Map mapping is unbelievable. I was able to find things in those flats that you'd never be able to find with any other mapping. Any type of depressions, ditches, it was crazy what that's the detail on that C-Map. So they'll be coming out with that for all states and lakes, in the coming months. And so be on the lookout for that. You got to get your hands on that new C-Map mapping. But with the active imaging in those new Low Ranch HDS Live units, I was able to find fish that you typically can't find. The detail on the side and down scan is unbelievable. but just what you can do with those new live units is crazy. I'd have never been able to find the fish that I found without without all the new features of the new HDS live units. So critical aspect. They've been critical all year. If you don't have the new HDS live units, you got to upgrade. But other than that, that's the Chickamauga recap. Again, it was tough, and I was happy to get what I got and get out of there with a decent finish. So. Next up, we'll do a recap of Santee, and hopefully we'll see where it goes from there. Thanks, guys.